Welcome to this video on how to use Games Workshop technical paints. We've got some amazing tips in how to get them to behave more reliably and how to achieve a fantastic result super quick using dry brushing. In this video, we're using Games Workshop's technical paints, in this case Martian Iron Earth, and we've got some amazing tips on how to get the most of them, how to get them to behave more reliably, because I think some people don't understand the nuances between that, and how to dry brush them to get a fantastic result super fast so you can get an army on the table as quick as possible.
Okay, so to do these bases, this is what is going to be doing most of the work for us. This is Martian Iron Earth from Games Workshop. We're going to use a brush that has seen better days. It's an old brush that I use for washes, I use for metallics, foundations, stuff like that, and it's definitely seen better days, but you still need a brush that you've got a decent amount of control with, because there are very different effects you can get from applying these texture paints, just according on how thick you put them, what shapes you make with your brush, etc. Three bases here. One has cork, one has got a thin layer of PVA on it because that'll change the way that this cracks, and another one that has nothing on it. Now if you put it on thick, you'll get larger cracks, deeper ones, and it'll behave differently like that. If you put it on thin, then that'll affect how it is, and if you put it on a surface that is more or less absorbent, so the one with the PVA on will be more absorbent, that also affects the speed that it will dry at. The direction of your stroke is another important thing when you're using paints like this, so what I tend to do is put on a couple of blobs and then join them together. But if you use a patting motion, you'll get something that looks a certain way, and if you stroke it all in the same direction, then you'll get something that looks perhaps not as random as you would like. You don't want this to look like a man-made effect that you're putting down here. So we're going to place on our Iron Earth, making sure not to have it too thick at the edges, because I don't want delicate stuff at the edges, because that's where you could get cracking. So keep my thick bits in the middle, and I've applied it in a patting motion, and then we'll go through the others. These are going to be applied all at the same thickness, and then we'll come back to paint. Okay, so using Martian Iron Earth from Stippling, I'm going to place it here. We've got some cork on this base, putting it down nice and thick. We want some good texture there for dry brushing to be able to pick up on, and our wash to be able to run into the recesses of. Do not use your Sunday Best brand new brush for this. I'm using one that has been used for washes, it's been used for a lot of foundation paints, and it's my kind of go-to size 3 for PVA and messy tasks. Now I still base coat with a high quality brush because it just speeds up your work if you've got a precision tip, but this one has been demoted to kind of texture based tasks and stuff like that. You don't want to use an old blade brush as much though, because for areas like this one, sneaking in under the cork, it's helpful for you to have a decent amount of control. There we go. And I'm just going to push away any blobs from the edge of this base, because I don't want to have big flakes at the edge, because that's where it's going to get picked up, it's where it's going to get touched throughout painting, and I don't want things to flake off. If there's any flaking off in the center, I can put a tuft there to hide it. So that looks pretty decent. Obviously we can do whatever we like in terms of the thickness on the cork, because we're going to be picking it up by the base, not by the cork, so we don't have to worry about being delicate there. And we're just going to leave these to dry, and we'll come back in about 20 minutes or so and continue the next step. A little top tip for when you're using products like this: a wet finger is a fantastic way to get any blobby bits around the edges completely crisp. So if you slightly overdo it, it's not something you have to worry about. Just run around it with a clean finger, and then you can get a gorgeous crisp edge on your base, and that you really will reap the benefits of that when you're painting the base for them later, because it'll look super crisp. So here we are after exactly an hour. if we look at our original 3 bases, you can see we've got one wall that appears to have much more consistent cracking. That is our PVA one, that also cracked pretty fast. But generally it looks like it's all over the base. We've got more of a kind of some areas are localized large cracks and some areas are really smooth on one where we didn't put the PVA down. And then this is our just typical base, no PVA, but we've put it at the same thickness on top of the cork and on the plain base itself, where they've behaved slightly differently. Out of interest, we have here a thin one on the cork. So that's the type of effect you can look to achieve if you get a thin one. Of course, these dry a lot faster as well. And that's particularly relevant when we look at the one where we put it down really thick. This blob here took maybe 20 minutes longer to dry than everything else on all the other bases. But I do think this base looks fantastic. What we have to do now is we have to protect these. This is delicate stuff. I don't even want to touch this particularly close to the edges on the plastic areas where it doesn't stick, because it's on a more glossy area without that PVA or not on a non-absorbent surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit all of these with a couple of coats of Money Touring varnish from Games Workshop. Any spray varnish will do. If you're using it from an airbrush, don't use it too close because you could blow the flakes off. The little flakes like these bits here, particularly if you get under it and it kind of just catches it and then it could be gone forever. You can cover any bits we get rid of with a tuft, or just get away with it with painting and washes at the later stages, but we're going to protect these and then we're going to move on to the painting. So you can see that slight sheen from the Money Touring varnish. That's made a real difference to the solidness of these bases though, and particularly given that we're going to use washes, if you try to seal them with PVA, which is water soluble, that can break down when you do your wash and then soften so that during dry brushing they flake off, and I don't want that at all. So we are now ready to go at these without having to be too cautious. Wobble wobble. Okay, for our first step of paint we're going to be using the small Series D from Artis Opus and just some Eshin Grey. Get our dampening pad. This is more stippling than dry brushing this stage, but still we're going to follow the procedures. It's good for our brush and it'll probably be helpful for the model as well. I'm fine with taking paint out of a citadel pot from the lid as long as I'm not dipping too deep, but normally I would take it out with another more scrappy brush. And then we're just going to work our way around the cork sections, cover them over. Of course you don't have to use the colour of the texture paint we've got, but we're going to work with it. You could prime this black and then just rock on with whatever you liked, but we're going to try and work with the colour that we've got down on the base. And we're just doing a kind of a very rough, stipply, slightly dry brushy base coat, and we're going to cover in all the areas of the cork, and then we're going to gently get it coming up to catch the edges of this as well. More stippling there than dry brushing at the top. If anything's not super neat, don't worry about it. This is the base of the model and we have a wash, so areas that you don't cover are probably going to be the recesses. That's absolutely fine. So for the second stage we have grabbed our little Artis Opus Dippy palette. I'm going to put a couple of drops of water in there, and then the wash we're using here is Dark Tone from Army Painter. Any black or dark wash is fine though. It could be really dark brown, could even be a dark purple or something like that to add a bit of interest, but we're going to keep things fairly neutral. Roughly 50-50, and then we're putting this all over our base. Not too thick, but one thing we do want to bear in mind is the areas with the deeper cracks, we want to make sure that they've got enough in those areas that the deep cracks come out nice and dark and black. So I'm going to start putting my paint there, and then I'll spread it from the deeper cracked areas to the thinner areas where it's not as much of an issue. So start in the deep crack and then work our way to the rest of it. Making sure to get all of these areas as well. Can see some little bits there that have been missed when we were doing our stippling. It's very three-dimensional material cork, so this is a good step just to make sure you catch these. You can actually mix a bit of black paint in with these washes if you want to make it even darker and be absolutely sure to get in all those recesses or to make things higher contrast. So I've actually hit this with a second wash just to make sure those areas stay super dark, and that should achieve quite a lot for us. Just gonna leave this to dry and then we're on to the dry brushing. So for our next stage, we're going to be using Screaming Skull from Games Workshop. Obviously that's in a different bottle to normal. I've put this one on the palette because this is going to be done with traditional dry brushing, so I want to be able to make sure that I've only got exactly what I need, and I want it close to the area where I'm testing it as well on my palette. So this is super light dry brushing, and we're going to be going, it's a difficult one because we can't really pick to go from one direction because our texture comes from all directions, but we're going to carefully build it up and make sure that we can catch the very edges of those lips there. That's what we're looking to get. It's a very different colour from our base coat, but it'll help things look nice and sandy, and against the tufts, which are going to be super vibrant, having something a little bit pastel is fine. Taking it really carefully from the edge of our pool of paint. Still using the small here. I want the edges to be quite bright. Again, we're capitalising on the fact that we got that middle section with the greys. Gorgeous texture to be picked out. You can actually use this stuff on models. A lot of people don't think of it, but if you want to put scales on a model, obviously they're going to be a little bit random. You can use these texture paints for that. So we'll get all this base for that, and then we will go on to our detailing. Wobble wobble. So detailing, we're going to be using Swamp Tuft. This is from Army Painter, but there's lots of different brands available. The reason we're picking this is because it's a green that kind of is reflected in the green of the eyes on the Blood Angel I'm going to be popping on these bases. So we've got a red base with green details, and we've got a red model with green details, and I kind of like that coherency. Top tip for these is that you can use any nice sharp detailed knife to chop them in half, and that may give you better sized tufts for snuggling up against details or getting into recesses and that type of thing. So we're just going to poke those where we need them. There you go, so you've got half a tuft. Take off any excess. You can glue these down if you want. It's probably a better idea to use some, and then we can nestle them in there, and because we've chopped those tufts in half, that flat edge is the edge that we're going to put under the recess, and it helps things look a little bit more natural. There we go, looking pretty good. Final step is just to use a black of your choice. I really like matte black from Army Painter. Pop a bit on our palette there. Take a little water. I'm using a nice beefy size 4 with a really lovely point on it. And we're going to quickly whiz around the model and clear up that base room. So you can go along it this way, or some people like to do it this way for control, kind of like your edge highlighting. Either way is fine, just take your time and get a nice layer around the lip, and that's going to make up for any overspill we've had with our dry brushing stages. Really nice way just to gently tie things up and frame your model. I prefer basing in black as far as base rims go, but you can put it in whatever colour you like. There we go. So super quick across an army. It looks genuinely brilliant though. Really fast, effective way to do your basing, and the texture there lets us use Series D really nicely. On larger bases you can do a lot more, but we're just doing a 32mm here to go with our Blood Angel.
So that final result is great. I hope you've learned a bit about using Games Workshop's technical paints, and perhaps with a bit of education making them behave in a way that is suitable for whatever you're looking for in your project. Our Blood Angel is looking amazing now, but of course you can take that basing theory and apply it to anything, and it's not just Martian Iron Earth. You can do it with the Grell Earth. You can do it one colour and then just paint it grey and paint it whatever you like. Paint it bright green if you wanted. So that's a fantastic result, done in a really efficient time, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial.